As most of you know, a month ago I buried my mother. As nearly none of you know, a month ago I buried my mother. In Jewish practice, the Jews do not bury their dead at the hand of some stranger. If the immediate family is available to do the burying, the immediate family does it. And Congregationalist though I be, as soon as the formal ceremonies at the graveside were completed, and I passed through this pair of columns of people greeting the mourners, technically my sister and me. I then made a U-turn, went back to the grave, grabbed a shovel, and started filling. And my son saw what I was doing, got the hint, and he too grabbed a shovel. There were 3 shovels, and so various members of the family took turns as we filled the grave right to ground level. Why? It is considered to be one of the greatest possible outpourings of love in Jewish practice, to bury somebody. And the only thing that you can really analogize it to is the idea of somebody goes to sleep and you tuck them in. And the reason that the burial is so high in this scheme of what acts of merit are greater and which are lesser, the person whom you are tucking in will never have the opportunity to return the favor. So that is the concept of burying right to ground level, done by the immediate family. Professional grave diggers are available. If they're in the area, they can come, they can take a shovel, or they can do the entire job. But to those who understand the Jewish practice, there is a level of comfort in being able to pick up the shovel and tuck in this person who has met the final moment of this life and is now proceeding on to the next life. As I was preparing for the sermon that I would preach this morning, naturally I looked at the readings that were attached for the day, and by clicking and pasting on the wrong thing, I started off preparing a sermon that included a reference to last week's song. Whoops. But it has been my experience that as one leafs through the pages of the Bible, when you accidentally come upon something that you weren't supposed to be coming upon, it may well hold a message in there that is meant for you. And so last week's appointed psalm, Psalm 22, has all of these horrible images that happen to people. And it goes on with these complaints, one after another. This has happened to me, and that has happened to me. And it concludes with the verses, I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax, and it is melted within my breast. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to my jaws. And the final note in the psalm, You lay me in the dust of death. In other words, the psalmist is saying, you, God, are the one who tucks me in at the final moment. You, God, are the one who tucks me in. You lay me in the dust of death. We see God as the divine parent taking on this chore that, in Jewish understanding, no one can reciprocate. And indeed, think of all the blessings that we have from God. And it doesn't take terribly much to say that these blessings are those whom no one can reciprocate. It seems particularly fitting that we started the service with reference to Sandy's elevation in the Order of Eastern Star, another odd coincidence. The Order of Eastern Star is a sister organization to the Free and Accepted Masons, and I had planned to speak about them too in this sermon. And so I shall. The Masons teach, and when at last we are called upon to pass through the dark valley of the shadow of death, the earth once more receives us, and God piously covers our remains within earth's bosom, thus admonishing us that as from earth we came, so to earth we must shortly return. God piously covers our remains within earth's bosom. God acts, serving us. In our gospel lesson, James and John were striving for the places of honor in Jesus' kingdom. But he taught them not to seek the places of honor, but said that we must be slaves of all. And in our first hymn this morning, we play out that idea and talks about the washing of feet. In that hymn, it talks about Jesus washing feet at the Last Supper. But we know that in many churches, not recently ours, during Holy Week, the minister, pastor, whomever, washes the feet of various members of the congregation. And it is taken as a symbol of servanthood. The washing of the feet is something that was done in the ancient Near East by the lowest member of the household. And for the highest member of the household to take this on is an act indeed of servanthood. It is an act of profound humility. And in modern church practice now, it is one that most commonly falls amongst ministers, pastors, those who have some license or ordination as leaders amongst us. But we, being from the Protestant line of thought, believe strongly in the priesthood of all believers. All of us are priests. But that means, taken in the context of this morning's gospel lesson, all of us are servants. And when we take a look at the old priesthood, the priesthood where sacrifices were offered by the priest. They were sacrifices that were offered on behalf of the entire community. And of course, the priest was in a very prominent place. But look at that sacrifice again and look at it as servanthood, and it takes on a completely different color. Think about our communion table. Think about the person who is at our communion table, who is reciting the prayers, breaking the bread, pouring the wine, all of those things. And see it not as, look at me, but rather, I serve you by acting on behalf of all of you. Because we all sacrifice by serving each other. We must be slaves to all. We must be slaves to all. Now, as part of my making the rounds as a supply preacher, I had the amazing good fortune to be leading a service at the parish picnic in Elmira. And these people in Elmira at the First UCC Church know what it is to suffer at a picnic, because they do their parish picnic inside air-conditioned room where the bathrooms are right there, the sinks are right there. I'll tell you, it's rugged. It's really rugged. But they do it in a park. Now, that particular church is built right next door to a federally assisted housing project. And logically enough, that church has taken on, as part of its ministry, ministering to the people of very limited income who live in this federally assisted housing project. Section 8, if you're familiar with the term. And the Section 8 people are, to a large extent, very much the broken people of our society. But this church, when they do their parish picnic, to this dreadfully air-conditioned room, they fill up vans with people from the Section 8 housing so that they can get out of town, have a change of scene, see things somewhat differently. And so we got to the point in the service where the offerings were being brought forward, and I, having preached for them before, knew at this moment in the alms basin there would be slips of paper with prayer requests. And there were no slips of paper. So I turned to the usher. I said, "Where are the prayer requests?" And I was told, "We forgot to bring them." So it does have some character of a parish picnic. It does have that character of things we forgot to bring to the picnic. Well, fair enough. Somehow we here in Newark Valley managed to struggle along without writing out prayer requests. We have another mechanism for doing it. So I stepped away from the pulpit when we got to that part of the service, and I came very close to the congregation, and I explained to them that the prayer request slips were not there. And we would take requests for prayer live, spoken right then and there. And I saw these people go, scary idea. So I decided to break the ice, as it were, and having just recently preached in Buffalo, I shared a prayer request for the entire city of Buffalo, where I have never in my life seen so many prayer requests for cancer victims. So much so that I had a tight list of prayer requests, and there were the birthdays and the anniversaries, and there were the ordinary sick people, and there were the cancer victims. They got their own column, and their column by far was the largest. And I started remembering in my law school days stories of the Love Canal and all of those sorts of things, and how Buffalo has this history with cancer, and Buffalo evidently still has this history with cancer. I've discussed it with Buffalonians since, Bison if you prefer. And they tell me that yes, they have an immense occurrence of cancer. Buffalo is a cancer hotspot. So I started by offering that prayer. And as I'm offering the prayer, one of these Section 8 people bursts into tears. And there's this loud weeping and wailing and all of this stuff going on. And seated next to her is one of our regulars who puts her arm around her and kind of cradles her and starts rocking her. And this was not a moment for me to just bull on through. And any more prayer requests? Wrong moment. So I got very close. I got very close indeed, so that if I saw that she wanted more cuddling, I could do it. And if she didn't want cuddling, I could just stand back. And I said to her, God will be with you. And that calmed her down a little bit, and I repeated it, God will be with you. But I saw the congregation still paralyzed with fear. How do we handle this disruption? For indeed, their perception was that it was a disruption. And I turned to the congregation, I said, repeat after me. God will be with you. And we did it 3 times, and she calmed down. And she just kind of rocked silently in the arms of our regular who was there. And then came the various prayer requests, thanksgivings, and all of that. And I have to tell you, in all the time that I have been doing ministry, that was one of the most beautiful moments I had ever observed. God's presence was unmistakable. God's healing was unmistakable. And the servant ministry of the entire congregation was unmistakable. And I was on a high for the following several days to be present and to help guide this amazingly holy moment in which we truly lived out the idea we must be slaves of all. So, against the background of that, against the background of that kind of view of ministry, of our shared ministry, let us read 1 Corinthians chapter 12, a very familiar passage. Paul writes, now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are varieties of services, but the same Lord. There are varieties of services, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. To one is given the Spirit, the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge, according to the same Spirit. To another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the one Spirit. To another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the discernment of spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. All these are activated by one and the same Spirit who allots to each one individually, just as the Spirit chooses. Now set that against the background of this morning's gospel lesson, and it presents a challenge to us. We have all these talents, we have all of these abilities. I alluded to one earlier, George's beautiful voice, Lori's talent for keeping things straight and figured out, far beyond anything I could come up with. And so on, various places. But this is not something by which any of us lord it over the others. Oh, I can do this. I'm special. That's not what our Lord teaches. And so let us look at this Corinthians passage again. As to those of us who are given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, we must be slaves of all. As to others of us who are given the utterance of knowledge, according to the same Spirit, we must be slaves of all. As to others of us who are given faith by the same Spirit, we must be slaves of all. As to others of us who have gifts of healing by the one Spirit, we must be slaves of all. As to others of us who have the working of miracles, we must be slaves of all. As to others of us who pronounce prophecy, we must be slaves to all. As to others of us who have the discernment of spirits, we must be slaves of all. As to others who speak in various kinds of tongues, we must be slaves of all. As to others who have the interpretation of tongues, we must be slaves for all. As to others of us who have the talent for carpentry, we must be slaves of all. As to others of us who have a talent for baking, we must be slaves of all. As to others who have a talent for hospital visitations, we must be slaves of all. As to others who have a talent for accounting, for public speaking, for leading a congregation, for figuring out a path, for getting through a difficult transitional time, for running an office, for running a kitchen, we must be slaves of all. Whatever our God-given talent, whatever our God-given talents, we must be slaves of all. It's normal and natural to like attention, to like praise, to like being cherished. It's not evil, there's nothing wrong with that. But our Lord teaches in Luke, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. These are people who are not being slaves of all. I have in my acquaintance a young man who, all of his boyhood, wanted to be an Episcopal priest. And it became clear that the young man in question loved to get on a stage, loved to perform, loved to be publicly seen, loved to play his instrument, and show off his stuff. But that's not the right way. If that's why you want to go into ordained ministry, or any kind of ministry, that's not the right way. On the other hand, a friend of mine, one of my professors, had a member of his congregation who every Sunday would overcook her dinner, meaning not that she cooked it for too long, but rather she cooked too much. And then she would call up somebody in the church, someone whom she perceived as lonely, as unhappy, as just needing some human contact and say, oops, this horrible thing happened to me. I cooked too much dinner. Can you help me eat it, please? And she would do this week in, week out, week in, week out. And none of these people whom she called ever figured out that the whole thing was a scam. But what a beautiful God-serving scam that is. What a beautiful God-serving scam. This woman who understood we must be slaves of all. Amen.